kick off this next session, I'm going to hand it over to our esteemed panelists, but I just wanted to start off by saying that as we were planning the conference, the Leadership Circle spoke a lot about the transition, the partnership, the collaboration between academic institutions and the biopharma companies. And I'm sure many people here are either part of those organizations, whether it's a university, a biopharma company, and it's like the secret sauce. Like, how does it get from a university into an early stage company? So without further ado, I'm going to hand the conversation over to our moderator, Audrey Greenberg, founder of Center for Breakthrough Medicine, and I'll allow Audrey to introduce the panel.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you all for joining us today. We all know that in Philadelphia, it's all about extracting commercially viable ideas out of academic institutions. A lot of the innovations that are taking place right now occur in academic settings. So how do we do that? That's what our discussion is going to be about today, and we have a great panel set up for you. I am Audrey Greenberg, a co-founder and chief business officer at the Center for Breakthrough Medicines. We're a cell and gene therapy CDMO based in King of Prussia, where we do viral vector manufacturing, cell therapy production, all the supporting testing and analytics, as well as plasmid DNA production. So come see us if you're looking for manufacturing or testing. And I will let my esteemed panelists introduce themselves. So handing it over to Lori.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Lori Gavrin. I am currently the Chief Business Officer at New Excel Therapeutics, which is a neurodegenerative gene therapy company spun out of Penn State University. How I got here is a windy path. I'll just give you a minute intro. So I got my PhD in organic chemistry at Penn many, many years ago, and I worked as a medicinal chemist at Wyeth and then Pfizer for about 12 years. And then I decided I wanted to see what else there was in the world of drug discovery. And so I moved to GSK into a leadership development program where I did 3 different roles, one in strategy and portfolio, one in medical affairs, and one in discovery partnerships with academia, where I worked with Colin. And it was that those 3 years where I realized, I had spent my whole career looking inwards inside a test tube inside a company, and I wanted to start looking outwards. And you can do a lot with collaborations, and so I moved into business development and spent the last decade or so building and creating partnerships, managing alliances, and really see the critical importance of collaborations and partnerships to drive medicines towards patients.
Your biggest fan.
And I'm preaching to the choir I've worked with so many of these people, so.
Hi, I'm Colin McPhee. I've spent more than 30 years at GSK. Hired in the UK, a trained pharmacologist, came over to Philly area in 2001 to head up a cardiovascular department. I've worn several hats since, but the most pertinent one for today is I was a member of a team, the DPAC team, Discovery Partnerships with Academia, whose sole remit was to go out and source novel drug discovery collaborations with academia. And even today, I oversee one that we did identify back in 2016. It's still ongoing. It's a very exciting collaboration with Johns Hopkins University on a mast cell target. So that's my background.
Fantastic.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm Erica Swift. I'm the president of BioStrategy Partners, which is a nonprofit of 7 academic medical centers and research institutions. Most are here in Philadelphia, and I'm seeing a lot of my fellow colleagues in the audience. So this includes Temple University, Thomas Jefferson Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, the Wistar Institute. We also have an international member, Duke National University of Singapore, and then also Penn State. And we really bring programs and services to the region to take our academic institutions and partner with industry to advance translational research to the marketplace. So we actively work within the community to do that. The other role that I have is I'm the Director of Operations for the Center for Medical Innovation at Penn State College of Medicine, where we work with our clinicians and researchers to move technologies forward, and BioStrategy Partners is one of the programs in which we do that. So prior to coming to Penn State 7 years ago and Biostrategy Partners 6 years ago, I had over 20 years experience starting out in economic development, then led into various industry sectors from consumer goods to dental equipment to medical devices. So again, that winding road that has led me here, that we're trying to move innovation to the marketplace from academia.
So Erica, given your background, you obviously have a really good view of the landscape. Could you help us set the stage in terms of flow of funds into academic institutions and what's getting translated out?
Yeah, absolutely. So Autumn is the organization of tech transfer professionals that really reports on this. So their latest report was back in 2020. And what we're seeing is actually $83 billion flowed into research institutions as far as their expenditures. About 48 billion was actually federally funds. So there's a lot of funds flowing into academia. What really translated then out, as we saw a little bit greater than about 27,000 invention disclosures. So these were new technologies that were disclosed within these research organizations. Just so I get the numbers correct for you guys, so about over 17,000 patents were filed. We saw over 10,000 license or options. So these were technologies that were licensed to industry in 2020 out of academia, and there was just about 1,000 startups formed. So the real takeaway, though, from that message is, that our research institutions are a tremendous engine of innovation. There are absolutely some academic, medical centers and research institutions that do that translation well and can take products towards commercialization, but the vast majority of them, we really need to partner with industry to take that technology out of industry and get it into the marketplace.
Yeah, and just opening it up to the whole panel, in terms of projects that are being worked on with these dollars, a lot of times, maybe or maybe not, please tell me your thoughts on this, things may be worked on that may not be commercially viable or wouldn't be a potential candidate for a partnership with Big Pharma or maybe a VC or a funding source. How do we encourage or take into account commercially viable opportunities for these very precious capital dollars that are flowing in? Just get curious of any of your thoughts. I don't know who wants to kick it off. Maybe Erica, you want to take a first shot at it?
Yeah, sure. I think first and foremost, there is absolutely a need for basic research. So a lot of the work that is being done in academia, it's not all ready for prime time commercialization, and that's okay because building out that body of knowledge is really important. But at some point that does need to translate, for societal gain. And what we often see, sitting inside of academia is that we have a researcher who is interested in translation, and their work does speak to a specific need. However, where the breakdown a lot of times falls is they're not understanding the complete needs of the customer, or they have a solution to a problem, but it's not the solution that the market wants. So we really do spend a lot of time working with them to do customer discovery, saying, okay, well, if in the case of a pharma product, have you looked at the clinical workflow? How would your solution fit into the clinical workflow? How would your solution be received by the patient? If it is something a drug you need to take every hour on the hour, you're not going to get good patient compliance. So you need to take that into consideration and adjust your work that it does meet the needs of the customers, that you are solving the problem in the way the customer wants the problem solved.
Yeah. What about from a big pharma perspective? What are your thoughts, Colin? You've seen it.
Yeah, I think from my experience, you can tackle it in two ways. One was DPAC when we went outsourcing, and there each group is playing to their strengths. Complementary. You've got academia who does the deep knowledge on the target and the biological path, and then you've got Big Pharma who's got the drug discovery expertise. So that was the principle of DPAC, and obviously in everything that companies cover, there's always funding.
Yeah.
With DPAC it was end to end, so that's more like a startup. So it went from the screen to royalties with a medicine at the very end. So it should accelerate things because you're going to be identifying a PI who kind of gets it, to your point. So I'm sure Laurie can comment on this as well. There was clearly those who got it from the proposals. So you have to think of the end game first, the clinical the clinical outcome and work back. And that's no different from people who are just coming into industry. They don't quite see, they always go target out as opposed to clinic back. And it's always around somebody's ability to articulate the therapeutic hypothesis, that modulating target X will benefit disease Y by doing Z, and Z is the underpinning mechanism. So those that can articulate that well and early, I think, progress the fastest, whether it's even internal or going outside to academia.
Very interesting. Lori, what about your perspective here? You've been through it a little bit as well.
Yeah, I would say that, I sit on a committee at Drexel, a culture oversight committee, and we see a lot of professors pitching ideas, so similar to, what Colin was saying at DPAC, where, you have PIs that have these ideas. And sometimes, as Erica mentioned, these are really basic research, really important, but not necessarily marketable. And so it's a matter of saying, have you asked the question, is there a need for this? A lot of times I find people solving for things that there isn't a need for, solving a problem that doesn't exist, sort of creating the solution to a problem that doesn't exist. It even happens in big pharma too, I would say. Probably we're getting better at this. I think big pharma is getting better at it, but when I started my career, this was 20 years ago, we were working on a injectable TNF inhibitor for rheumatoid arthritis. It was my first project, an oral small molecule. And I was so super psyched about this, and I got the opportunity to go to a rheumatoid arthritis conference, and there was a patient engagement session, and I was talking to some of the patients after and said, well, we're working on an oral version of Enbrel, because sure you don't want to inject. And they were like, what? No, we want to inject because it's instant relief. And so we had it totally wrong. They didn't want to take an oral pill and wait 2 hours for it to feel better. So we were solving again for a problem that necessarily wasn't there. So I think, it's always important to take the consumer patient, whoever's the end line, into account.
Yeah, makes sense. Patient focus for sure. So at the Center for Breakthrough Medicines, we recently announced that we entered into an academic private collaboration with the University of Pennsylvania about viral vector manufacturing and coming up with a more scalable next generation way to make these vectors, which, as you know, everybody's sort of seen how expensive it is to get some of these therapies, $3 million around that price point. So how do we reduce cost of goods sold? Some of these academic private collaborations are about taking the innovation, pairing it with the dollars, finding a way to speed the path forward. What are you seeing in terms of how the benefits between sort of the academic private collaboration, and how is that benefiting from your perspective, and how these partnerships can transform the future for patients?
Well, I can answer from the small company perspective where I sit now. So I'm at NewXL. Prior to that, I was at Team Unity Therapeutics, a CAR T cell therapy company. These small companies, they have specific expertise, but and same with academic PIs, but don't necessarily know how to, do scalable GMP manufacturing. You depend on CDMOs and the such, but you don't necessarily have the, quality and all the technical expertise. More than that, it's the clinical expertise, just the clinical strategy, the regulatory, the commercial. So there's so much that needs to be done to take, even if you have positive clinical results, from that to getting it deployed in the marketplace is a massive leap. And small companies shouldn't and have that expertise. They don't have that expertise. They don't need it. You can partner with pharma who does, or small companies or PIs can as well. So,
but how hard is that? I mean, you're on the front end of this stuff. You're potentially working on some partnerships at GSK. What are you looking for, and how do you see that really making a difference?
Yeah. So for the academic PI, they have to obviously bring something to the table that's unique, that we can't do internally. And so if I make the example with the Johns Hopkins with a real life example, he had a lot of the in vitro and even in vivo models in place. And what was really nice as well, but we had to be pretty confidential because his work, he's a Howard Hughes investigator as well, and their publications in general are very, very important. But what was really, really good about that was we had access to some of his publications before it came out. So we knew the profile of the target as far as what it means to the clinic. And obviously it was just the core team, a few individuals. It was ring-fenced because that could really kind of screw up the publication if I get it out. So that was really important. And as it turns out, he had very relevant in vivo models that were ultimately published. So that was a strength. But something that was very obvious at the very beginning that I was talking to Erica about, he was very much entrenched in his target and he had a limited thought about where it could go. This was really from our first meeting. He wasn't wrong, but the potential was a bit broader and the clinical path could be much easier and de-risk much easier and still could be commercially powerful. And so one of my first questions to him, you're at Johns Hopkins, have you gone and talked to some of your clinical colleagues who's experts in disease XY? And he said, no. So then off he went. And then this chap is clearly a very, very bright individual. But again, he wasn't aware until, okay, I can help out here. And subsequently there was just took 2 or 3 years and there was a very good publication come out from that initial discussion that helps us, obviously, and helps him. So again, think about, because ultimately it's always relationships, isn't it? Relationship with academia, relationships, they have to trust. We've had multiple times that big pharma isn't trusted, which you kind of take badly. How come? Come on, I'm not scary. I'm a Scotsman, but I'm not scary. So you've got the relationship building, and which is really critical. And that goes for the PI within the institute. And if he's thinking about, with a medicine at the end game, he should be talking to clinicians in his own institute. And so that's the DPAC. And then the relationship of which is standard for big pharma is collaborations to support an ongoing target through its clinical development. And I've had really excellent collaborations with something that went to phase 3 outcome trials from preclinical and clinical that facilitated the progress and the validation of the target and highlighted it as something quite exciting. And one was a big collaboration with UPenn in a pig coronary artery disease model that cost quite a lot. It's equivalent to a small clinical study, but that was published in Nature Medicine, so it was great for both parties. We did, then you go to the clinical side of things. You're going for biomarkers, you're going for experimental medicine studies, and again, with the target I'm talking about that went to phase 3, epidemiology was a huge theme. We had to have clinical cohorts that all originated predominantly from academia, so we set that up, got a good story there, and one of the first and big ones was published in New England Journal of Medicine. So again, everybody loves publications. Academics and us to support, validation and to accelerate the development. Right, and so I think my theme for this is relationships are very important at all stages, because once you've got relationships built in, even if it's supporting an internal target for GSK, it builds, then you've developed a relationship and you know who to talk to in the institutions. So even small things can turn out to be big.
Erica.
Those are great examples there, Colin. I guess I look at it too, like this is a relay race, because the academic, from academic institution to big pharma, I mean, the whole drug development process is really long, and there's nobody that's ideally perfect to start with basic research all the way to having a commercialized project. So that's where like the academic medical centers and the research institutions come in and doing that basic research, getting that translational, elements. They need to be, I love the whole comments about building those relationships, because you need that input that, you're developing that correctly to be able to hand it off. So they very well could then go into that startup model where you're doing those further development, you're bringing in a whole new level of expertise. Before then, that's going to be handed off to big pharma, maybe to take it from that phase 2, out to actually a marketed drug.
Yeah.
But it is a long process, and nobody is perfectly geared to do that entire marathon. It's more of we're sprinting and handing it off, sprinting and handing it off till we actually get it out into the market.
Yeah.
And just to pick up on one thing that Colin and Erica said was the alignment piece, which I think is so important, because, no collaboration is going to work if there's different endpoints in mind. So aligning on our mission is to get this medicine to a patient, or maybe the mission is to get a publication, but whatever that mission is of your collaboration, just having that alignment from all parties.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, is how do you start with the end in mind? And I think it is just aligning on what is that endpoint. Is it a value inflection point? Is it a milestone? What is the milestone? How do you go about having that conversation and avoiding it hindering any progress that you want to make in your own personal goals if you're a PI?
Yeah, I think that, it used to be in the old days, and I can hear from my academic friends, maybe it still is, publish or perish, right? And so the PIs at universities are focused on publishing, and scientists in pharma certainly and small companies are focused on patenting. And so, how do you kind of align those two objectives? And I think, we talked about in our planning session, we talked about the changing the kind of theme from publish or perish to deploy or die. And, I think that is sort of it resonates with people. Like, what is the point if you don't get this out to the people that need it? And so really, I think, there is a way to get that alignment early on, just having those difficult conversations of, what is your end goal here? You really have to just have those conversations and make sure you're aligned. And because if you're not, then it's not going to go well.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that shift even from the federal agencies that are, basic research funding. Now it is. They really want to know, what will the outcomes be? What problem are you trying to solve? How will your research eventually be commercialized? We're starting to see that even in, the grant applications that are flowing through, because our office is getting those questions. Is like, I need to explain, what's my development pathway to get this out into the market? And, so we're seeing, basic researcher PIs coming to us, asking for help with that. So I think there is that shift from that, publish and perish. It's taking time, but we're getting even pressure that, no, this needs to be developing somewhere.
How does the PI get access to that information, right? We're talking with academic institutions all the time. We're looking at innovations that are occurring in a lab. And what we're looking at it from the perspective at CBM is, how are we going to market this to a customer? What is XYZ Biotech going to find the need for it? What are the differentiators? Why is this compelling? And then you ask that and they just, I don't know. So how do you get the investigators thinking about the marketability, and how do they get access to even finding that out?
Yeah, I'm going to do a shameless plug for BioSP, Biostrategy Partners. So I think there are programs out there, like what we're trying to do with our nonprofit, where we're bringing those conversations together early. Where you have a really interesting innovation inside the academic institution. You have industry partners that are looking to fill their pipeline, but we're still too early, inside of academia to really be able to license that technology out. So what Biostrategy Partners do through our Germinator program is we bring those two together. We understand what is the industry's need. We share that with our consortium members, and I think right now we're pushing over $2 billion in research expenditures. So it's a wealth of prime innovations there to look at. And then we have what are some very interesting technologies, but they're not quite ready yet. And so what Germinator does is a jointly funded program to really de-risk that technology. What is the particular data that they're looking for? Is it a particular animal model that they want to see efficacy and toxicity studies completed that they know are going to have to be part of an IND, submission package? So we work to get that data that's really de-risk the technology in the way that the industry needs to then license it in. So I think that is, programs like that is one way to really provide the PIs the guidance on what they need to do with their research to get it to a point that it can transition over into industry.
Yeah. So you set up a meeting, you have a meeting with GSK or Janssen or one of the big pharmas or a VC that's potentially going to provide some capital. What do you need to do to be prepared for that meeting to be successful? What information do you have to bring to the table? What should you think about beforehand so that you can take it to the next stage?
Yeah, there's several key things. I think Colin hit one that was perfect, and that's that value proposition. Exactly what problem are you solving? Why are you better than what's currently available? And so why should a person choose you? So definitely having that and having a real problem that you're solving, like knowing that you are solving an unmet need.
Yeah, and, oh, sorry.
No, on you go.
Okay, I'll pass it over to you really quickly. The data package that you bring to the table will lend itself to different types of collaborations or opportunities. If you have very, very early, if you have an idea, maybe you get a research collaboration. If you have some preclinical in vitro data or very early, maybe again, a research collaboration. If you have shown, in an NHP, a non-human primate efficacy, well, you might be talking about a licensing deal, So the type of either capital that you're going to raise, collaboration that you're going to embark on is going to be very dependent on the data you have and the risk value proposition you have about how translatable will that be to humans. And I think that's when, when you're at big pharma looking at potential collaborations, that's what you're looking at, what's the chance of success here?
Yeah, and the other thing is to facilitate the interactions. With DPAC, you could say we were selecting PIs that had all the systems in place, so it was an accelerated program, right? So conceptually it was. However, there is a downside, and some people in this audience will know it takes over a year to get the agreement signed. So all that gain is negated by legal discussions and we know this because we did it in Europe, Canada, and America. In the US, it just takes forever, even compared with your cousins north of the border in Canada, and way quicker in Europe. So I think you should work at that, because that does deflate things. And to be honest, sometimes it falls down, which is a shame. And John Hopkins was a classic case, was a classic case, but not just did you have two lawyers, the Institute plus the GSK, you had Howard Hughes. So it was a nightmare. Right, so it was...
It takes a lot of time and money.
Yeah.
Correct, and understandably when there's IP, and royalties, big money at the end game, but the bottom line is that has to be worked upon. That doesn't need to be that strenuous, I would think.
Yeah. We were going to say something.
No, I was just going to agree.
Wait, how can the tech transfer offices, who's doing it right? What's an example? I think Philly is in particular doing a great job across our academic institutions. I've spoken to people when at the NIH and things like that, from California perhaps another, where they arise these conflict of interest issues. How do we get around that? How do we get the tech transfer offices to be more efficient? Who's doing it right, and what are they doing that's making it work?
Yeah, I think Philly is actually doing an excellent job. The agreements might take long, but that tends to be, I don't know, it gets caught in like these legal cyclones, I don't know. But I think what the amount of trust building that has happened over the past 5 years or so, 10 years maybe. I mean, when I was at GSK early on, I was trying to build a like office hours from GSK at a medical school in Philadelphia. And I asked the dean if we could set up, I won't mention any names of any medical schools, but I asked the dean if we could set up office hours in their school. And they said, you want like to have your industry people troll our hallways for IP, and you just want to let you do that? And I was like, what? No, like, we don't want to steal your IP, we want to work together. And so it was that kind of attitude. Now, within a few years, we had office hours at the medical school there. And, we built trust, but it was like, oh, okay, it was sort of an eye-opening experience that, oh, there is this inherent lack of trust between the kind of industry and academia. And so it was really about, let's break down those barriers, do seminars together, do these various programs. So I think, and Philly has a really nice consortium, I think started by Wistar, where, all these different universities work together, and they, it's a very collaborative region. It's just a matter of, I think if you're big pharma coming in, you have to build that trust up. Same with even, spin out small companies. You have to show that there's interest in, if you have so when I was at Team Unity, we had a license agreement with Penn where we got to look at the IP first, before they went to someone else. And so you have to treat that, prestigious relationship with respect and, be very diligent and take only what you will use. And, you build that respect by action, really. So I think we are getting better in this region, and the collaborations are getting easier. I do think, agreements take a long time, but I don't think it's any like fault of a tech transfer or BD department. It's more,
Nature of the beast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, Lori. And I think too, I came to academia 7 years ago. Prior to that, I was in industry. And I was really surprised at kind of the misperceptions, I'll say, that you have inside of an academic institution. Not everybody, but some, like where they don't understand industry, they don't understand the language, they don't understand how they work, they don't understand why they're always in a hurry, because this takes time, so all these little things that like they just don't understand. So therefore, that kind of does break down the level, the communication. There is kind of a mistrust because it's viewed like, oh, you're only, you're not building the body of science, you're only after money, and not understanding of why money is important in drug development, and how much it really does cost. But I think I love the statement you had about doing the seminars, because I think when you're able to bring folks from industry inside of academia to give seminars, to meet with them, to talk with them, it starts to shed light on the differences, but then the similarities that you are trying to achieve the same thing, and that's improving patient outcomes and bringing new medicines and new technologies to improve patient care. You are, trying to achieve the same things. You're at different points in the continuum.
Yeah. Colin, any perspective on that?
No, not really.
Okay. What if you had
nothing new, I should say.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. You agree?
Yeah, it's
So if you had, I don't know how much more time we have, but if you had one wish, leaving this panel, wave your magic wand in relation to this topic, what would it be? Lori, why don't we start with you?
One wish in the whole world.
In the world.
Or related to this topic.
Related to this topic. Maybe both. Why don't you answer both?
Okay, so I think that what I'd like to see is, just like I said at the beginning in my introduction, is I have realized, that we can do a lot more and we can get a lot farther in partnership than working in silos. And whether that's an academic PI or big pharma or a small startup, we all need each other and we need to partner and collaborate with each other. So, I guess I wish would be that, these agreements could go a little smoother, like if we could figure out, and what does that take? I think that just is about us keep working towards alignment, trust building. In the end, we're thinking everyone has, I think, almost everyone in this industry has the patient in mind. And so I think, the more we communicate, collaborate, the better the outcome for the patient. So that's what I look forward to.
Good answer.
Yeah, not much to add there. I mean, it's really important to continue interactions with industry and academia. There's huge benefit for both sides. And it's just to facilitate that. Sometimes, strategies change. For GSK, we're not so much looking, outside at the moment because the focus is in mining all that we can from 23andMe. So, however, that means there's potential academic collaborations downstream, depending how that goes. So the collaborations are always going to be there, not necessarily end to end, but the core, there's no reason the core should be always to facilitate, discovery of new medicines for the benefit of people.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Erica, what's your wish?
Yeah, Lori did say it so beautifully. I'd have to echo completely, but yeah, I think my wish would be that our, sitting inside of academic institution, that our PIs do see the value of engaging and collaborating and partnering with industry earlier on than they would even imagine, to really understand, those endpoints and start with the end in mind and looking towards how this is going to impact the patient. I think that those types of collaborations and early direction from industry even would accelerate research and translational research, to improve patient care.
Wonderful. Do we have time for audience questions? I don't know if there are any. 5 minutes. Okay. There's a question in the back.
Oh, she's hiding.
Oh, yeah. Please ask a question.
Interesting on your I loved your panel, but I've had many interviews with people, venture capital. So in the heart attack space, you're speaking in general, but if you're in a certain niche, bring in medicine to the heart attack space. I've heard that the role of the bench scientist inventor is to take it to phase 3. The reason why we've had failures is because of lack of proper clinical trial design. So my point is, rather than exiting early on, which is what many have done before, things like adenosine, metoprolol, our latest example, the Gila monster saliva peptide, exenatide, these would have made it, and we have better exclusion criteria. So I'd like your opinion about the role of the inventor farther on, because private funding wants to see this commitment from the inventor. I've heard this in our interview process, been part of the I-Corps program. I'm SBR funded twice, maybe 3 times over coming up. So I know a little bit about the interview, so I'd like your opinion about different spaces. You spoke to a general thing, but mine's more specific.
Definitely, that's something near and dear to my heart, no pun intended. My father passed away from a heart attack this year. And there's a lot of folks in this audience and at this conference that are working on heart disease indications. So thank you for bringing up this subject. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on clinical trial design.
Yeah, so I actually want a second wish, if I can, that we can protect diagnostics, because I think, especially looking at that clinical trial design and having those companion diagnostics to really understand your target patient set, that a therapeutic that may be dismissed in clinical study, that it might be working beautifully, but for a smaller, patient population, but without the proper diagnostics, we're never going to be able to identify that patient population which the therapeutic is working for. So therefore the whole drug gets dismissed when that might have been a little bit of a precipitous decision.
Yeah, and I do think just adding on is partnering with a CRO or a CDMO that has the expertise to know how to bring this particular therapy through the process with the FDA, making sure you have the end game in mind in terms of scalability and processes is going to be really important, not just in terms of that end game, but in terms of speeding that path forward. So that's a really good point. And we have time for one more very quick question. Yes?
So there is no journal of failed clinical trials, but there are journals for publications that are on extraction costs or other types of scrutiny. What do you think would be a good way to go about this data that's good for subset of population would be made available to people to analyze or comment?
Yeah, I could talk from my own experience of a phase 3 outcome, 30,000 people. The PIs are academics, right, from Harvard, from Brigham's, and other places. So, you know, they get huge involvement in the design, in addition to the clinicians internally. So it's not just internal clinicians driving it, but once it gets going, it's like a behemoth. Right, that's the trouble, and the tanker once it gets going, you can't stop it. And the trouble is with cardiovascular outcomes trials, they're very expensive. So if it fails, the organisation won't do it again, for obvious reasons, and that's just reality.
Yeah.
But there is a push to publish more trials that fail, and so that people can learn, because you learn a lot more from failures than
we do.
successes.
We do.
Yeah, they publish that. Yeah.
Yeah, good question. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Hopefully you learned a lot, and enjoy the rest of the conference.